I suppose we could say that what I have been saying to you represents my own discovery of truth. I don't mean my invention of it, but my own way of coming to the discovery and realization of it, and that part of this work of the infinite way is to help others make a discovery within themselves of truth. You can see that it would be fatal just to open the books and read them and swallow everything and just say that's it, and then go around quoting Joel and proving that that's it. That's really not the nature of the message of the infinite way. That is why we're not organized, or rather, it's one of the reasons we're not organized. We're not prepared to say that this is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and we hope you never read anything else. This is more or less an impulse that there is within me to share with those who are led to me my discovery and those things which I discovered, but above everything to reveal to them how I discovered it, so that they may make these discoveries themselves. Now, as you know, I did not begin to perceive the nature of truth until I learned about meditation. I did have the spiritual experience. I had many of them. And I was doing spiritual healing work. But I did not know the nature of truth. I could have quoted some things out of books, but that was a long, long way from having any knowledge of truth. You might really say that I was living on quotations, and living on quotations is not a healthy diet. They're helpful in the early stages, but that's all. Now, when I learned the secret of meditation, that is when I began to learn the secret of life. And through meditation, I have discovered things which are in the writings, which are in our classwork, but which can only be valuable to you when you discover them and realize them within yourself. For instance, I might quote to you one statement which should make all other scripture obsolete and unnecessary. I and my Father are one. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Now, you know, if you really know that, you have ended your search for truth, and you've ended your search for God, and you need no scripture, you need no teachers, you need nothing. You have it all. And yet you know as well as I do that those words have been in the Bibles for hundreds of years, and still here we are, studying, meditating, pondering. Why? Even though you were to agree with the Master that that is the absolute truth, I and the Father are one, you are still far from the demonstration of it, the realization. In fact, you may be just as far as you were before you even heard those words. It takes more than knowing words. It takes actual experience. I think it's in the first chapter of Living the Infinite Way that I've said that the infinite way is not another message on truth, but the experience of God. And that's what it is, because that's what it leads to. Reading the books isn't an experience of God, but reading the books can lead to it if you follow through. Now, this is very important to know what I've just said, because I'm going to lead to a point that probably is the modern language way of saying that I and the Father are one, and all the Father hath is mine. And yet, it says something beyond that. Now, this too was a discovery, and this too was a revelation, and it was a revelation that came to me through meditation. That is why meditation plays the important part in our work that it does. I believe you can learn anything you want with your mind, but I do not believe that you can demonstrate any spiritual truth until you rise above the level of thought and mind into the intuitive spiritual faculty. And so far, there is no way known on earth of accomplishing that except by means of meditation. Yes, it does come to some by a divine grace. For some unknown reason, the finger of God reaches out and touches some people, and there they are. They're in the full and complete spiritual consciousness without ever having taken the steps that we take leading up to it. There have been many such people. One of our happiest and yet unhappiest of men was one of those. That was Walt Whitman. Walt Whitman was just a miserable man like the rest of us, when in some unknown way, for some unknown reason, except perhaps that there was an inner longing, the finger of God touched him and he entered the realm of spiritual awareness. What kept him miserable afterward was that he had to live in two worlds, and living in two worlds is a difficult thing. Now, for the rest, the finger of God touches us just to the point of giving us an inner hunger, an inner dissatisfaction. Sometimes that hunger and dissatisfaction becomes so great that we become diseased, physically or mentally or morally or financially. And when that gets deep enough in us, a cry goes out of us, "Oh God, oh God, oh God, is there a God?" And that's usually the beginning of wisdom, because from there on we are very apt to follow some way until we arrive. Now, those who are led to the point where you are today, even those of you who are just beginning on this way, you are ready for the experience of meditation, and those who have it must prepare themselves for deeper forms of meditation until they arrive at an actual communion with God. Communion is meditation carried to a far deeper degree. Communion is that point of meditation where you actually come into the experience of tabernacling with the Spirit of God within you, where it is even possible to have conversations with God, or where it is possible to sit and receive these beautiful impartations, sometimes in words or thoughts, sometimes just in awareness, just in sensing. But at least it is that point of communion where there seems to be a flow between God and me, and an incoming and an outgoing, a turning and a returning, an inner communion, a sweetness, a gentleness, a peacefulness, sometimes that transcends all words and thoughts. Of course, that's not the stopping place, because as one reaches there, one eventually transcends that, to where one's own self completely disappears and there's nothing left but God. It's a completely pure state of being, and in those moments one is not only aware of themselves, one may well be aware of themselves out in the grass or in the trees or in the birds or in the sea. It is a sense of self that has no finite or corporeal limitation. It's not an imaginary state, because if it were, you could bring it on at will. It isn't anything one can bring on or induce. It is something that automatically comes at a certain state of realization and revelation. Now, it was through such experiences that the classes which now form the books, Living the Infinite Way, Practicing the Presence, and the Art of Meditation, have come. You must remember that none of those books were written as books. You must remember that in my whole life I've never written a book. All of these which are in print now, and seems to be some author's writing, actually were just messages that were spoken as this one is being spoken, and was later printed on paper. None of my works were ever written as a book is written. None were ever thought out in advance. None ever had notes drawn up, or an outline, or a diagram. None ever had a subject or a way of formation. Every one of them came as this one is coming, just out of meditation, and it's being taken down on a recorder, and eventually it will be a book or an article or a monthly letter. It'll be in print somewhere, and somebody will wonder when Joel gets the time to write all these books. Unfortunately, he doesn't need time because he doesn't write them. Now, it was in these meditations, and as a result of this work, that this particular unfoldment came. And while it appears all through all of the Infinite Way writings, it came to a head in the first Honolulu closed class. It was the subject of the first and second night. The first night was the nature of God as I, but the second night was the nature of individual being, your being and mine. Now, this constitutes, and as I say, you'll find it all the way back in my earliest writings, but this constitutes one of the major premises that every student of the Infinite Way must learn, even if at first they learn it only intellectually, and then later discern it spiritually. And that is this: you are not man, and you are not woman. You are not an effect, and you are not creation. You are I. And that is why when you name yourself, that's the name you give yourself. I. And even if you say Mary Jones after it, it's understood that you have first said I. That's why legal documents say that. I, Mary Jones, and so on. I am not Mary Jones. I am I, but I give myself the name. Mary, Bill, Joel. But always remember this: I am I. And that's your true identity. And because of this, you cannot receive anything, even from God. Now here you have a major premise of the message of the Infinite Way. There's no use of praying to God for anything, even if you could, because you can't get it. The nature of my being is I, and I is infinite. I and the Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. That has nothing to do with the future tense. That has nothing to do with whether or not I'm good, bad, or indifferent. That has to do with the real nature of my being. It has to do with ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And the truth is, I am I. Moses gave it to the world. I am that I am. And Jesus accepted that very same statement. I am that I am. I am is the nature of your individual being. And that is why we have scriptural passages that show you how to live from that basis. Cast your bread upon the waters. It doesn't say a word about pleading or begging for bread. It says, cast your bread. All the way through Scripture you can find proof that good flows out from our being. It does not flow to our being. If you wish to see the miserable lives that some people live because they're sitting around waiting for love to come to them, and others are waiting for friendship to come to them, and others are waiting for justice and for mercy to come to them, and they wait and they wait and they beg and they plead and they pray, and it doesn't come. And if only they knew that there's only one way in which they can ever demonstrate having love, abundance, mercy, justice, goodness, and that's to give it out. Express it. Let it flow out. Cast your bread upon the waters. I and my Father are one, and all that the Father hath is mine. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Now, you will remember, well, those of you who were here last week will remember our lesson on the 58th chapter of Isaiah, in which we learned that it's no good to sit around and say these things and pray these things, but that you have to act them out. And so I learned by meditation and then by actual demonstration that the fullness of the Godhead is in me. That God has fulfilled himself as my individual being, and I can demonstrate it in proportion to my ability to live it. So that if I have but a few coins today, and I accept this truth, and am willing to part with one or two of them to share it with someone who has still less, or if I have no coins, but if I have merely this awareness of my identity, and I'm willing to sit and pray or realize that truth for my fellow man, for my friends, for my neighbors, for my enemies, if I'm only willing to know the truth, if that's all I've got, cast that bread upon the water. Or if I can find some way to be a friend, if I can find some way of expressing forgiveness, if I can find some way of being more just, more merciful. In other words, if I can accept the messianic message that thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me, even though the Father, the invisible, is greater than the visible, nevertheless, thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me, and I can begin in any given moment to act out that way of life by loving, sharing, forgiving, cooperating, being more just, being more merciful, being more kind. If I can begin in some measure to do that, I begin the demonstration of my harmony. Be assured of this: God has not created his own image and likeness and left it blank of anything. The image and likeness of God does not lack for anything. The image and likeness of God, God's own manifestation of its own being, hasn't got a lot of money and no health, or a lot of health and no money. The image and likeness of God hasn't got kindness and justice and mercy, but otherwise full of sin, sickness, and death. The image and likeness of God, or that I which I am, the infinite Spirit itself in individual manifestation and expression, that is the embodiment of all that God is, and I am He. That is a revelation of truth, but it is not a demonstration of truth. The demonstration follows the acceptance and acting upon of that truth. And sometimes it is a slow process after we have accepted that, because remember, to all appearances we're sick and sinning mortals. To all appearances we're aging and dying humans. And so we are always violating appearances when we accept the truth about our own being, our own inner spiritual being. And so it is that we have to often close our eyes and realize this: I'm not claiming, Father, that a human being, a mortal, is divine. What I'm claiming is that a human being or a mortal must die to that seeming sense of self and realize that God itself is spirit, but since God is all, God is infinite being, even when it's individually expressed. I'm not claiming any truth for my mortalhood, my mortality, or my human identity. I'm acknowledging that in this search for truth, I'm attempting to die daily to my humanhood, not spiritualize it. I'm trying to die daily to it. I'm trying to surrender it in the realization that God is infinite being and constitutes individual being, spiritual being, incorporeal being, invisible being, the being that I am. Then, as I ponder that and receive that inwardly, I begin to understand the nature of the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, do you know why it is said, I am the way, the truth, and the life? Because that's what it means. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Do you know what it means when it says, I will never leave you nor forsake you? Why not just sit still for a minute and try to get rid of I? Just try to run away from it. Try to drown it. Try to get anywhere where I isn't. And you'll see why it is also said, if I make my bed in hell, thou art there. If I mount up to heaven, thou art there. If I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, thou art there. Why? Because I am there. I am here, and I am there, and I am everywhere. Lift up the stone, and I am there. And I is God. I is infinite being. I is self-completeness. And so we have in the message of the infinite way a whole teaching on the subject of self-completeness in God, and it's spelt with a capital S. It doesn't mean that we humanly are complete or perfect or self-contained or self-maintained. On the contrary, as human beings, just look how we suffer and lack. But in putting off that selfhood, in surrendering it, and acknowledging that the I of my being can never leave me nor forsake me. As I was with Abraham, so I am with you. I will never leave you nor forsake you. And then we come to that miracle teaching of Jesus Christ, which is accepted wholeheartedly in the infinite way. I have meat. No, don't go to the city to get me any meat. I have meat that ye know not of. I am the wine of life. I am the bread of life. I am the resurrection. And that I will never leave me nor forsake me. And where I am, I is. For I is the true nature of my being, and I is my meat, and I is my wine, and my water, and my bread. I is the staff of life to me. I is my high tower, the rock on which I am founded. I is my hiding place. I live and move and have my being in God, in the I that I am. God is my fortress, and I hide in that fortress which I am. God is my high tower. Nothing by any manner of means can reach me, assail me, or injure me, because I am, and beside me there are no powers to do any injuring. For I alone is power. I is bread. I is meat. I is wine. I is the resurrection. And if we secretly and silently always lift up the I, for if I be lifted up, I shall draw all men unto me. And if I lift up the I in me silently and secretly, for remember this, and I give you this again and again and again, you already have tapes on this, and I don't know but what it may be in some of the writings. But I know that it's in tapes, and if it isn't in the writings, I'm sure it will be. Never forget this. This is Matthew, 6th chapter. Take heed that ye do not your alms before men, to be seen of them. Otherwise ye have no reward of your Father which is in heaven. And don't think for a minute that that isn't a spiritual law. That the good we do publicly, the benevolences we do publicly, are of absolutely no value beyond whatever praise we get from a man whose breath is in his nostril. But our spiritual reward, our spiritual recognition, lies in the fact that there is an I at the center of our being that knows what we're doing, thinking, and acting. And it performs for us, so that what we do in secret is shouted from the housetops. And when thou prayest, thou shalt not be as the hypocrites are, for they love to pray standing in the synagogues and in the corners of the streets, that they may be seen of men. Verily I say unto you, they have their reward. But thou, when thou prayest, enter into thy closet, when thou hast shut thy door, pray to thy Father which is in secret, and thy Father which seeth in secret shall reward thee openly. But when ye pray, use not vain repetitions, as the heathen do. We don't call them heathens these days, more like metaphysicians. For they think that they shall be heard for their much speaking. But the main thing here is, and I give you this from knowledge, never use the word I publicly. Never divulge the word I to anyone except it be one whom in sacredness and secrecy you are teaching, as we are being taught this evening. Never go out of a room and voice the word I, even to your nearest and dearest. That must be the most sacred and secret word in the entire history of your life, the word I. Keep it lifted up inside of your own being. I. Oh, it's so good to know that I will never leave me nor forsake me. It's so good to know that I is the source of my life. I is the creative principle of my being. I is my hiding place. I is my bread, my meat, my wine, my water. I need not look to man whose breath is in his nostril. If I were lost in the desert or at the sea, I will be with me, and I will feed me and sustain me and bring me safely through. And if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will walk with me and reveal my life eternal unto me. I is a secret password. I is a secret and sacred prayer. The word I itself is the foundation for the deepest prayer that has ever been known. It acknowledges that the King, every time you say the word, no, not say it, think it, feel it inside. Every time you have the word I in here, you are acknowledging that God is closer to you than breathing and nearer than hands and feet. Is there anything closer than I? No, just think it inside of yourself, or even silently voice it and see if there's anything closer to you than I. And that I, which is closer to you than breathing, nearer than hands and feet, that I is the God power, or what we call the Christ, the Spirit of God in man. It is God's own individualization of his own being appearing on earth as you. And all the prayer you ever need is the word I. And then, as you voice it, inwardly, secretly, silently, open your consciousness. Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. And then you'll hear that the voice of the Lord melteth the earth. The voice of the Lord melteth all problems. When that voice utters itself in you, the whole earth melts, the earth of problems, materialism. He uttered his voice, the earth melted. You keep the I secretly, silently in there, and then open yourself to listen, and I will speak to you, and as it utters its voice, your problems will melt. Fears will disappear. Doubts will go. And all of a sudden out here, events will take place, all of which have come to you by the divine grace of the recognition that I, in the midst of you, am mighty. I, in the midst of you, am mighty. And it's your I, the I that you utter, that you feel, that you realize in there, and then let it have its way with you. This, you see, is one of our basic realizations, revelations, that we expect nothing, we pray for nothing, we ask for nothing, we acknowledge that God has planted himself in the midst of us. And in planting himself in the midst of us, all those things are added unto us. You know, in the midst of every seed that's planted in the ground, there is some kind of a power that attracts to that seed whatever it needs from out in the earth. We call that power nature. Planted in the midst of us is the word I. Planted in the midst of us is the presence and power of God, or that which we call the Son of God or the Christ. And that is there for one purpose, to attract to us from out of this world, from the uttermost ends of the earth, all those things necessary for our development and our unfoldment. And if our demonstration requires that somebody be raised up in Europe, Asia, Africa, be assured they'll be raised up and brought to our door. And on the other hand, if it be necessary that we be transported to foreign lands to find that which is necessary to our unfoldment, I, in the midst of you, will transport you wherever it is that you need to be. Only be careful. When you believe that all of your good is dependent on money, on friends, on influence, on human circumstances, you then prevent the operation of spiritual law within yourself. But when you acknowledge it isn't money I need, or a man whose breath is in his nostril, or influence or circumstance, but the realization of I, then you will find that that realization of I will go to the uttermost ends of the earth and draw unto you everything and everybody necessary to your experience. Let no one go too far in the message of the infinite way without realizing that its basic premise is the I, and the infinity of individual being, not by virtue of anything of itself, not by virtue of any human event, but by virtue of the divine grace which has planted I in the midst of me. You will see that this unfoldment carries you another step. It doesn't involve improving the human man, but bringing to light more and more of the Christ man, which in reality we are. It is only this false sense of self that has made us appear to present ourselves to the world as human men and women. And it is for this reason that the highest good we know as humans is trying to be better humans, or healthier humans, or wealthier humans, or greater humans. But there comes a point in spiritual realization when you know that if you could get to be the healthiest or the wealthiest, that would not be your answer. Only in the degree that through this inner being, which is brought to light in secrecy and in silence, only through that can you bring to light your Christhood. In that you realize you are heir of God, joint heir with Christ to all the heavenly riches, not needing to attain it by might or by power, but by my Spirit, by grace. By grace. And grace is your realization of that I in the midst of you that enables you to give up human thinking, human struggling, human striving, and enables you to rest in a spiritual peace. These things which constitute the letter of truth of the infinite way are first accepted by us and within us intellectually. We hear them and we say, yes, I can accept that. Yes, I agree with that. Yes, I feel that that is right. That's far from demonstration. But it is a necessary first step, because you must remember there are people who cannot accept it. There are those who reject it. There are those who, even if they hear it, not only couldn't believe it, but don't want to believe it. Oh, for different reasons. It takes spiritual discernment to recognize a spiritual truth. And so it is that the first step is the feeling within you that this is true. Now, many people have this feeling and accept it eagerly, and then wonder why a year or two later all their diseases and lacks aren't gone. And the reason is that this was only a preliminary step. there comes the next step of binding it on your forehead, binding it on your arm, posting it at the gate of your house. In other words, the Master says, abide in this word and let this word abide in you. Then you can demonstrate it. Then you are consciously one with God and you will bear fruit richly. But if you do not abide in this word, live in it and let it live in you, pray without ceasing, keep these words of truth within you and keep making yourself receptive so that it can utter that word, then you will find it won't be years, it'll be more apt to be just months when demonstration is beginning to appear. Can even be weeks or days. But you see, we are responsible. The first step is that in some manner we be brought to a state of consciousness where, hearing this message, we can agree that it's true and say, yes, that's the way of life for me. Ah, yes, but that's only our first step. Then comes the difficult part, abiding in this word, letting this word abide in us until it takes root. Then after it takes root, waiting patiently for it to bud and blossom and finally give us its fruitage. And one of the greatest aids to all this is secrecy. Symbolically, that is given to us in Scripture as the Mother Mary taking the babe down to Jerusalem, down to where? Egypt. Egypt, down to Egypt for 2 years. And so it is with us. We take our babes. Egypt represents the dark places, the hidden places. And so with us, we take these truths into the dark places within ourselves, the hidden and secret places, and we keep them there, and we think of them there, and we ponder them there, but we do not utter them. Eventually, they are uttered through demonstration, and without saying a word to anyone, people are attracted to us to hear the word, and then when they are ready for the depth of a teaching of this kind, we can give them the truth about our true identity. Always remember, though, we are taught to give the milk of the word to babes, the meat only to those ready to take it. When you come to a closed class here, it is assumed that you have read enough so that you are prepared for the meat of the word. And as a matter of fact, I would say that about 80 of you in this room have been through anywhere from 2 to 20 classes with me, so that you're ready for anything and for everything and for a lot more things that God hasn't yet spoken through me, but which we never know what minute will explode, as some of us have seen in the past. I'm always torn between two desires. One is I would like to teach only beginners and have none of our older students in the class, so that I really could start at the beginning with beginners and give them the milk and lead them gently along. And then I think about these other people who've been with us so long and that something might come out that they'd love to hear. Then I decide, I guess I won't have any beginners. I will just teach the ones who have been with us for years, and then it all ends up this way with beginners and old-timers in the same class. But I'm sure that each one receives in proportion to that which they have brought here. No one carries away more than they have brought, for the simple reason that it's you sitting here casting your bread upon the waters and ensuring that the waters the bread will return unto you. Now let us stop for a while with a meditation. Just think, knowing your own limitations, if I were to say to you, you are as infinite as God, how really foolish that would sound. And actually it is foolish. But when I say to you that God in the midst of you is infinite, that God, the infinity itself, constitutes your real being, and that actually that I in the midst of you is that infinity in its infinite nature, then I'm saying to you that which is true, that which you can accept, and that which you can demonstrate. Therefore, it is not wise to say or think, oh, I'm as infinite as God. Immediately that sets up in my mind my own limitations, and then I feel a little foolish. But when I put it the other way around and realize I in the midst of me is God, I is infinite, and that infinity constitutes my real nature and being, now I'm voicing a truth that does not even insult my human intelligence. That I can accept, that the nature of God is infinity, and the nature of God constitutes my being, whether or not at this moment I'm fully realizing it or fully demonstrating it. The question here is a deep-rooted psychological problem started in an insecure childhood any more difficult to heal than any other problem? Well, now, as a matter of fact, there is no such thing as problems being more difficult one than another, except in the sense that some problems present to the practitioner a challenge so that the practitioner may need to rise higher in one case than another, and that sometimes the patient has held on to something in his mind so long that he finds it difficult to release it. But you must understand this, that infinite way healing is not psychological healing, and therefore the healing isn't really dependent on you, or whether or not you can let go of it or you can't, or how long you've had it. The healing is dependent on a realization of the Christ, and to the Christ it really makes no difference what the name or the nature of these problems. And of course this thing here of insecure childhood being a problem, you know, that isn't even a truth humanly. That's merely an excuse on the part of materia medica for not being able to heal something very simple, because they haven't found out how. There is no such thing as insecurity based on an insecure childhood. The finest thing that can happen to anyone is an insecure childhood, and next to that is an insecure adulthood. Don't you know how sad it is for people to have something that they can hold on to in the external realm and then some days find it break under them? Don't you know that those things that people have depended on in childhood, like their mother's love and their father's money, there comes an end to those things, and then what are you going to do? Oh no, it's far better. I'd really rather be a Eddie Cantor with an insecure childhood. And a lot of others of those that I know, and have to look forward to something, have to reach out and find something real to cling to. As a matter of fact, that's the title of one of the greatest books of these years, The Value of Insecurity. That's not a psychological problem. That's a real truth. God has blessed a man when he has taken, or when the world has taken, every material prop away from him, so that he hasn't got a thing to rest on or be secure in until he finds God. And when he stops relying on bows and arrows and rifles and swords and atomic bombs, you know, he'll find there's a power of love. and a power of life, and a power of justice, and a power of truth. But he must first take, as a human, all the necessary steps of depending on atom bombs, depending on hydrogen bombs, and then finding out they're worthless because the other fellow's got more of them than you have. Don't you see that? The greatest thing that can come to us is the proof that a material prop and a human prop is no prop. Unfortunate is the man who's leaning on human relatives and human friends and human dollars. Unfortunate is the man who or woman who hasn't been forced to some place where they know. Is there something? There must be. My greatest blessing came with the realization that the human world depends on powers, always seeking one power to overcome and destroy another power. And I saw that that's what constitutes human experience, is this very security based on a power, and just when you've got it, it isn't a power anymore because somebody else has got more power. And then the question presented itself to my thought, is there no solution to that? Must we have hydrogen bombs after atom bombs? Must we have some higher powered bomb than hydrogen bombs? Must eventually something so powerful come as to destroy the whole world? And you see, it was through that my answer came. And I saw that the dependence on a power is the human side of life. And that when you realize that the secret of life is in no power, then you've achieved spiritual living. When you have nothing left to depend upon but an absolute silence into which the Spirit of God has to come, then you've achieved security. The only security that will last. Just as you will never secure peace on earth as long as it is achieved through treaties, and more especially treaties that are based on combinations of nations or powers. Oh no. Security will come when we ultimately realize that our bombs are of no value, our armies are of no value, and that there's a stalemate, and something else must take its place. And then will come peace on earth, and with it will come goodwill toward men. Now let's not forget this, that these psychological problems are really nonsense. They are just cover-ups for ignorance. The truth is that the greatest blessings that man can have is poverty, insecurity, instability, nothing left to lean back on until he finds God. And then comes complete salvation. Oh, just think of the men who've been betrayed by their friends. Think of the people in high power and high office who've been betrayed by those close to them. Think of the families that have been betrayed by husbands or wives or parents or children. Think of the betrayals of nations. And then talk about insecurity in childhood. It's a blessing. It's a blessing. I would like just in closing to tell you this, that in New York City there is an organization called the Grand Street Boys. Now the Grand Street is in New York's ghetto. It is the Jewish, Italian, and Chinese ghetto. And it has been for, I suppose, 80, 90 years. And this grand organization of Grand Street Boys is a group of men who graduated from the grammar school down there in Grand Street. And every one of the members are either judges, lawyers, doctors, professional men, businessmen, bankers, executives, every one of whom have come out of New York's ghetto. They're all Jews, they're all Italians, or they're Chinese, or all the mixtures that are found down there in that ghetto. And I can tell you this, There isn't a single man that ever belonged to the Grand Street Boys who didn't have a childhood of insecurity and of fear. It hasn't hurt them. And many of them have found God. Thank you.